This is a pretty uncomfortable conversation. I personally, thought I'd watch it from the outside while we have this discussion. But it's about degrees, and we are here in such a traditional sense of the world. Academic hasn't changed, and we're constrained in a lot of ways by the time frame of in a university, a credentialing system of a university, a grading system of a university. Like there's all these like we have to think about all these things if we're going to think about higher ed shifting, right? Otherwise, we're just going to be paving the same road that I've been talking about. So I've asked a gentleman by the name of Keil who's really passionate about it, maybe more passionate than I've ever met, but he is passionate about it. And me and Freddie have always had the discussion about how do we get Keil into the discussion where people can start just thinking about it, thinking about what does a degree mean? How do we unbundle that degree and how do we make it more credentialing kind of model? So Freddie, I'm gonna let you run with this. And Keil, I think if you turn on your video, you'll jump onto the stage.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. And thank you very much to the whole Beyond team for very engaging and very enlightening 2 days. Thank you, audience, for making it to the happy hour session of the summit. So if you have a beverage, please feel free. So as has been mentioned before numerous times during the summit, and Matt just said it as well, there's a growing recognition that there's a need for credible alternatives or an alternative to the traditional degree system, right? Just doing a simple YouTube search or a Google search will show you many voices and advocates for this, both in higher education, but also outside. So I'm therefore very pleased to introduce one of those voices today, somebody who I've been reading for the last year and a half, especially active on LinkedIn with some very engaging thoughts and very provocative thoughts as well. So I'd like to introduce Keil. Keil is a freelance writer and an editor, but most importantly for us, Keil has a self-declared obsession about education policy and history with a zeal for reform. These were his words. Keil, the floor is yours, and you can start sharing your screen.
Thank you, Fred. You notice Matt got me into a jacket, so I'm taking this very seriously. I'm sorry, Matt, I don't have a flower for my lapel like you, but I try my best.
I'll send you one. All right, I'll send you a couple.
And Fred and I are dressed alike, which is good. So we didn't coordinate beforehand.
So Keil, can you share your screen so that others can follow? Or if not, one of us can do it too.
Yeah, so can you try it? I'm having a hard time doing it.
No, I can do it.
It's okay.
I got it. That's why we have multiple people having this link, including our audience. Our audience has it too. So technically they could have followed you also.
You know what I needed to do was go into my preferences and fix it there. I forgot to do that. So sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. Here you go. You're set to go. Can you see it, Keil?
Can you scroll down to the bio?
Yeah.
Okay, it's like Fred said, there's my background. By the way, that photo's badly outdated. It's like 10 years old. So anyway, I want to convey that my views and my obsession with education policy are very sort of high level structural. And I come at this as someone who's a very, very fervent supporter of higher ed and wants to see it thrive. So it's very, very big picture structural. I don't want to be yet another person that is telling people in higher ed how to do their job or trashing higher ed or anything like that. All the research I've done is, and the passion that Matt talks about is very much about the what I perceive as the structural problems. And Rodney got at, a lot of the speakers so far have gotten at that. And so that's where I'm coming from. And my talk is going to very much focus on the degree system and alternative credentialing. So to give you, to come down to slide to so the how I got on this whole reform kick was about 10 years ago. The issue of college debt really started to be discussed a lot in the media. You saw these stories in books and articles and TV and everything about the whole debt situation. So I was very, very curious about how we got into this predicament. So I started to read and study the issue really, really deeply, and just focus a lot of my efforts on the structure that led to this problem. And all this exhaustive research that I did, it made me realize that the system itself is outstanding in a lot of ways, but it has these massive structural problems that go back centuries. A lot of the system is from the 19th century, England and Germany, and then the degree system is from the Middle Ages. So in 2012, you can see the quote there. I came across this profound essay in N+1 magazine about the origins of the degree system, which I'd always, like everyone else, I'd always kind of taken it for granted as this sort of part and parcel of education and you know, this sort of intrinsic part of it. But after reading this essay and further study, I really became convinced that the degree system itself is one of the root causes of our problems with higher ed in both the cost and the learning model. So if you can see there from the quote, the degree system was never intended to measure learning. It just wasn't. As the essay points out and other historical accounts point out, the degree system was very much intended to certify professors, not learners. And so the mandatory seat time that we generally 4 years that we still retain today, that's completely arbitrary. And it was meant to act as this onerous apprenticeship period to keep the ranks of professors scarce. So right from the beginning, it had this sort of pernicious strain to it that it acted as this sort of pay to play scheme. And it still sort of plays that role today. But what is, now if you scroll down to a little bit below this quote, what is important to understand, and there you can see the pictures from the University of Bologna. Go up, stop at the quote there, okay. What is important to understand about the degree system, that it was not designed by cognitive scientists, human development researchers, and hiring experts. It just wasn't. I get in an argument with a professor friend of mine who just insists that it's perfectly 100% logical. The 4 years makes absolute perfect sense. There's no problems with it. But like everyone else, he just is not historically illiterate of the origins, has not thought about it at all. You know, everyone, it's been given this sort of inherent legitimacy, like it got handed down to Moses on a tablet, and we retained it all these centuries and not questioned it, and we treat it like it can't be changed, and then there's this reverence for it that it really doesn't deserve. And I really feel if we were going to design a higher ed system from scratch, we would definitely not have a degree system. And I think if we retain it in its present form, we're going to have problems with hiring, we're going to have problems with cost, and we're going to have problems with the admissions craziness. So anyway, next slide. And here I have some choice quotes here about the degree system. So there are a lot of people going back over a century who have pointed out the flaws and deficiencies of the degree system. I'm going to tick off some major problems that I feel with it. Okay, first off, I think learning should be a lifelong thing, and the degree system has the effect of condensing too much formal schooling into a set number of years, generally 4. And so it creates this artificial deadline. The great German writer Friedrich Nietzsche pointed this out over a century ago, that it just, you're packing way too much into that first, 18 to 22 years of life. Second thing is that it really kind of changes the process of learning, because it makes it about trying to acquire a collection of grades, which are subjective, and you're trying to earn this piece of paper. So it takes the sort of intrinsic nature of learning and sort of subverts it a little bit. Another thing is that I think it injects this very unwelcome element of sentiment and tradition into the equation, where people are going to get this, the ridiculous cap and gown ceremony, no offense, the this it's treated like a coming of age ritual, the acquisition of the degree. And that, to me, that's a big factor in the cost because people want in on that. I think that the attainment of the degree has caused, who has them and who doesn't have them. It's manifested itself in this recent election where it's causing social and political and class and racial polarization because you see like Trump voters more heavily non-college educated, Biden voters have more degrees. And so it's almost become like this class and status marker. And you see the particularly on the rich, the Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman scandal was very much caused by the obsession which we got from the English aristocracy of using schooling and degrees as a status marker. That's why there's this obsession with getting into those elite universities. And it has really, I think, warped our education and economic policy because we've given degree attainment almost magical qualities to create jobs and wealth and knowledge. And particularly egregious, there was a lot of people in the media who do this, but David Leonhardt of the New York Times is the worst because he's constantly touting, well, if you get more people to get that degree, then they'll get, jobs and wealth. And that's not the way the economy works. There's always going to be there's always going to be a limited number of those white collar jobs. Just getting more people through the system and getting a degree doesn't change that economic reality. That's why it's so ridiculous to use the term underemployment, as if you can just mint jobs by sending more people to college, particularly white collar ones. And then the talk of college being a degree being a literal investment that pays off in the end is completely silly. And I think that many colleges are a little bit dishonest in their marketing that when they tout those stats. But the biggest flaw, the flaws of the degree system to me are most evident in the hiring process where, can you scroll down just a little, Matt? Thank you. When you have each of several thousand colleges issuing degrees, then you don't have every job applicant going through the same set of criteria. It's not really a common standard that you're having them go through. When I was a hiring manager at Expedia, if someone came to me with like a University of Washington degree and a Florida State degree, I don't know, they're not really going through the same vetting process. And I think amazing things happen in degree programs. You guys in higher ed do a terrific job, but the structure of the degree program, sometimes you get the degree doesn't necessarily convey what skills a person has. It's a series of completed courses. There are grades that are a little bit subjective, and there's a memory expert named Joshua Foer who calls the process sort of binge and purge because at its worst, the curriculum is a little bit scattered and aimless. You're taking a class, you're forgetting it, you're taking another class, and it's not really necessarily as intensive and cumulative as it could be. Also, the degrees are date stamped, so either the person forgets the knowledge since they got the degree, or the knowledge pertained in the degree dates itself. There are also issues like grade inflation, which is rampant. There's cheating. Someone at the passing grade can still get a degree. And then there's the problem of degree fraud where people are saying they got a degree that they didn't. There've been people fired from CEO jobs that did that. Also, the degree system ties the credentialing process right to schooling, so that any knowledge obtained outside of school is left out of the equation. So if you look at that Tom Wolfe quote, there's some greats in human history that would not make it through the door of corporations or organizations today because they don't have that magic credential. I think in many ways it's a form of discrimination, and we really should consider laws against hiring by where someone went to school, because similar, Frederick Hess of AEI pointed this out. It's in many ways sort of like the gender and race laws, the disparate impact laws that we dealt with. And finally, I think the big problem is the credentialee is paying to be credentialed and to get into the job world. To me, this is a big one. That to me is, it's problematic at best, and I think it's a real conflict of interest at worst. And I think that when the degree is drawn out like it is, I think there's that mandatory seat time. You have a bundled cost model with the electives. There's the enormous opportunity cost of keeping yourself out of the job world, but people miss that. And this sort of mundane looking bridge, for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, that's called the Twins. And there was an episode where Robb Stark, to cross that bridge with his army, was forced to marry Walder Frey's daughter. And this is to me, what the degree system represents. It's like a toll bridge with an incredibly onerous, in many cases, college is affordable, but for many people, particularly with these, the ones that require multiple credentials, is, we have the system of credential inflation that requires several credentials just to get into the job, particularly law, medicine, academia, and where you went to school is important. That the degree system is like a really expensive toll bridge. Okay, next slide. So what comes next? Well, you can see from this, Brandon Bustede has written a lot about alternative credentialing. And you can see from this quote, there's starting to be real skepticism that college and degrees are delivering what they promise, or what people want them to. And I think, again, there's amazing things happening at college. And I think that everyone should go to college on some level at various points in their life. But the system we have now, it has some serious problems. And so if you go down to the Salingo quote, there's also the recognition that instead of this sort of 4-year blowout, that you have this judicious and purpose-driven use of college across a lifetime, which I think this is sort of the way we use libraries and museums. You use it, it has to be based on genuine need. We have to stop this. Everyone should go to school as much as possible stuff, because first off, that's expensive, and it even overloads the ability of colleges to do their jobs properly, I think, because they get so many people going through there. It's hard for students to get one-to-one guidance, their wait times for classes, things like that. And so this is where alternative credentialing comes in. And we have a quote here from Chris Deedy, he's a professor at Harvard, and Katie Sievers works for Credly, which is one of the credentialing organizations. And I don't necessarily endorse Credly, she just happens to be there. So they wrote this piece a few days ago in Barron's. So you can see people are granted opportunities on the basis of what they, my thing is blocked here, what they learn rather than which institutions or networks they were able to enter. So what the alternative credentialing, once we work the kinks out and work the problems out, has the potential to be really effective at being a skills-based system. And so I don't want to get too granular about alternative credentialing, what exists, because there are hundreds of thousands of them by some count. Some of them include IMS Open badges. Google's gotten into the game with career certificates. You have Flatiron School, General Assembly, Credly, which I just mentioned. Then there's an organization called Credential Engine that acts like at this sort of cloud-based database to kind of like act as a clearinghouse. It does some good work. And as far as who's doing them, using the credentials and hiring. It tends to be the tech industry is kind of been the first ones out of the gate to use them. But right now it's kind of the Wild West, and they're not really getting used on a sort of formalized, widespread basis that I'd like to see. So I would like to just, rather than kind of go granular through all the sources, what I'd like to say is just, am I doing well on time, Matt?
You have about 3 minutes left, Keil.
Okay. So I think that what we need to have, there's a discussion that we need to have about, we need to have it be used in a widespread way rather than as this, what my main concern is that there's used as this sort of poor person's credential, and then for entry-level jobs, and then everyone else has to go through the whole degree gauntlet, because that's not really addressing the problem. So what, as far as action points, what you can see here, I feel that the higher ed is like the Titanic headed for an iceberg, and we're already starting to feel the effects of it from COVID. And like Rodney pointed out in the last talk, the structural problems were already there well before COVID. And I think people are starting to recognize this, but what I'm not seeing, apart from someone like Joshua Kim at Inside Higher Ed recognizes it, is what a deep existential threat that alternative credentialing poses to the business models, particularly these ones that draw in a lot of like middle or lower income students that are desperate to get themselves right into the job world. And so I think, can you scroll down a little bit? So in the short term, what I think campuses can do is to embrace alternative credentialing. And you have to embrace it. I think that if you're trying to cling to the degree system and seat time requirements, it's a losing proposition. You have to adapt to this new reality. You have to bring down costs. One way to do that is to separate the whole college experience and keep it separate. In my view, that shouldn't have been part of the equation in the first place. And you really have to start to provide direct and specific job skills. In the long term, if you can scroll back up again, up a little bit. I really think that because we really don't have one, we need a nonpartisan, nonprofit education reform movement to spur reform at all levels. As part of this movement, we really need a special task force to just address that issue of job credentialing, because that, to me, is possibly the biggest issue. Okay, closing thoughts.
You got some good questions coming, so.
Okay, I don't want to run long. Okay,
No.
go ahead.
Why don't you close, and then there's a.
Okay, you can read there, but I think I've said some things that maybe are provocative, but if I want to say this, if I don't tell you them, someone else will, because every few days there's an article about the degree system in the media, and trust me, because I read this stuff religiously. There was an article in Medium magazine just a few days ago that said the same thing. So we have to address, I think eventually it's going to go away on its own. And I think that colleges really need to start planning for this new reality and take action.
Great. That's it, Keil. Thank you very much. So we have some great questions. Paul Reinhardt asks the question, just curious, are you aware of any countries that may have a more rationally designed degree credentialing system than what we have here in the US?
I'm really not. I think that the rest of the world is in the same boat. If you take a country like Germany, they're very much the use of the PhD as a status marker is worse than it is here. I saw, I think it was Algeria, that they had riots because you had a bunch of freshly minted engineering grads that were surprised that they couldn't find a job when they had a degree. How did that happen? This is a lack of reality. So nearly every country has that model. I think there are some other countries that are much better at making it affordable than we are. But then again, they have a lot fewer people go to college. So Maybe there's one out there, but I've not seen a country that has a more rational approach.
Okay. And Satvir Singh has a question. Very good points. Wouldn't you agree that corporations and companies also play a very important role when they say that they will recruit candidates only with a bachelor's and a master's degree?
Well, it's dumb hiring. I mean, I'm going to put it bluntly. Stupid hiring, number one, and grossly unfair and unmeritocratic. And like I said in the talk, we really should sit down and start to contemplate legal laws against it, because it's really gumming up the work. And poor hiring costs companies billions of dollars a year, and it's just you're shutting out a lot of well-qualified people. A lot of poor and minorities are hurt by this system. And I absolutely agree with the questioner that's the employers, and they're not, apart from law and medicine, they're not under any legal obligation for the most part to hire. There are plenty of people got through the system without the degree. The entrepreneurs, I know some that I worked with at Expedia, but I just want to say, you don't want people to avoid college entirely. We have this false dichotomy of going versus not going. You should go. I just think that the job assessment process needs to be handled separate.
Yeah, I think that just to close up, Matt. One of the things, and I don't know if it was a law or a directive, but the Trump administration just passed something. I don't know if it was a law or a directive, but that all federal agencies from now on can only hire on the basis of skills and cannot make a degree mandatory. So there is definitely a changing tide, I believe. It's an interesting topic. Like I said, I think it's going to be much more relevant in the years to come. And I would 100% agree with you that if higher education does not deal with this head on, then it's going to be forced upon them. I gave you a perfect example for myself. I wanted to get involved in blockchain. I went online. What is the best school in the world that gives blockchain education? Happens to be in Cyprus, University of Nicosia. That's where I'm going. And the fact that it's in a different country did not matter to me. It was a solid program, so that's where I'm going. So I think these things are actually slowly starting to change, Keil. But I appreciate your thoughts and your insights. And I think we're going to hear much more of this. Matt, I hand it back to you.
No, this is, honestly, I appreciate you coming on, Keil. This isn't a popular discussion that anyone wants to have, right? So I give that to you, right? Because you're coming into the lion's den and saying their baby's ugly, right? So just think about that. That in itself, I give you that a little bit of the props. Now, I think Satvir says something in pinpoint. I don't necessarily think this is all a university or college's fault. I believe that if corporations and industries could, if they could change their hiring based on other criterias and other, maybe credentials or whatever the case is, you will see higher ed shifting away from what it is. Now, in earlier discussion, I think it was in our skills discussion, I think Preeti made a comment about, I don't want to go to a doctor that doesn't have a degree. That's her comfort level, right? So the question is, how do you give the credential that makes people feel comfortable that that person is, is qualified, right? There's a little bit of that discussion that we need to hear. I think the one problem we have is we have what I would call a degree decay or degree inflation, right? Because you now have everyone with a bachelor's degree. It is so easy to get an MBA now. It is so easy to get degrees. And it's, just because you can go and get it, now you have all these different people that, what are they? Now we just have a bunch of people now being limited. So now a person that is a clerk at a particular organization needs a bachelor's degree, when the skill itself doesn't require it, right? So there's all these things that are coming into play, including the limitations that some of these degrees put on for allowing for people to have a trajectory into market. I think that's what I get from you every time I listen to you and talk to you. I am a believer that there is a place for higher ed, and how higher ed figures that out, I think is going to take a little bit of time. But
Oh, I agree completely. I'm a big higher ed believer. There's some stuff on my slide 4 I didn't get to. It sort of gets at that, but yeah, it's definitely the credentialing part that is causing a lot of problems. And I urge anyone. My email there is at the end. I have a lot more, you know, citations, articles. I have zillions of them with all these various arguments and everything.